Business Value podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their business on their terms. Our mission was born from the lessons we've learned from over 100 business transactions, which fuels our desire to share our experiences and wisdom so you can succeed. Now here's your host, CEO of Mastery Partners, Tom Bronson.
Hi, this is Dave Casey, and welcome to Maximize Business Value, a podcast for business leaders who are passionate about growing their business and building sustainable value in it. You may recall that I've been on the Maximize Business Value podcast before, talking about my own exit as a part of the 17% Club. As you know, and you may be wondering why I'm sitting in the host chair today. Well, we want to wrap up this series the way we wrapped up the last one, and that's by interviewing Maximize Business Value podcast leader Tom Bronson on one of his own business exits. This episode is part of a series called Tales from the 17% Club. As Tom is wont to remind us from time to time, 83% of attempted business transactions fail. Only 17% are successful. And that's really an abysmal number. So in this series, we interview people who have made an exit, and we call them the 17% Club. And we want to hear more about the process of that and how that works out. So in this episode, I want to welcome our guest, Tom Bronson, President, Mastery Partners, and the host of Maximize Business Value. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, thank you, Dave. It's sort of a surreal experience to be welcomed onto my own podcast. This is the second time we've done this, so I'm excited to hear what you're going to want to talk about today.
Yeah, you may be surprised at some of the questions that pop up. So.
I feel certain that you are going to try and throw me off my game, but have no fear.
That's my goal. So I got to ask you, how many business transactions have you actually been a part of?
100, exactly 100. In fact, I didn't even realize that until I was approaching the last transaction. I started getting kind of introspective and retrospective about the number of transactions, because so many people who would look at my life would say, wow, serial entrepreneur. I never really thought of myself that way. But I did 100 transactions, and I didn't realize it until I was closing that last transaction. And suddenly I kind of have kept a mental list, and I went back and I added to it the gaps. And I went, oh my gosh, it's transaction 100. Now, many of those I was a buyer, not a seller. But I've been a part of 100 transactions. It's hard to believe.
That's unbelievable. See, I have a grand total of 2. So I bought one and sold one.
All right. So 98 more, and you'll also have 100.
I'll be right up there with the Bronson. Well, which one are you going to talk about today?
I thought
one out of 100.
Yeah, picking out one out of 100. The one I want to talk about today is perhaps the most painful one that I've ever been through. And I'll let that story unfold, but it was my first foray into owning a restaurant. So today I want to talk about Palenzo's Pizza House.
Palenzo's Pizza House. And when did you sell that?
Might have been late 2010. I probably should go back and look at the records on that, but it was certainly in the 2010 or early 2011 timeframe.
All right. Well, I'm going to start peppering you with your own questions that you're so good about hitting us with. So, did you have an exit?
Before you pepper me with that, let me just tell you a little bit of background on the restaurant. So, at the time, I owned Granberry Solutions. I was the CEO of that business, and of course, we had some investors and folks that and people who've actually been on this podcast. Who were investors with me in that business. But we did software for pizza restaurants. And I had made really good friends with one of our customers who had a wildly successful pizza chain, still here in the Metroplex. It's called Palio's Pizza House or Palio's Pizza. And so I'd been great friends with Harry Awad, who was the owner of that business. And he wanted me to potentially open up a Palenza or not a Palio's. And, but we really wanted to open one in the town that I live in, with some partners of ours. And we couldn't strike a deal with that because Harry had other partners that wouldn't let us, open in this space. And so we really formed the business, after, realizing that I wanted somewhere to have a place to test my software. Right. I wanted it. I'd never owned a restaurant, hadn't been in the restaurant space. In fact, never worked in a restaurant. I'm one of those guys that, growing up, I wasn't a waiter. I didn't work in a kitchen, but I love to cook. And so some friends, I mentioned this to some friends of ours, who we frequently went on vacations with. Our kids grew up together and whatnot. And one year, we were skiing in Salt Lake City, or outside. It was actually closer to Park City. And one of my clients I knew, or one of my customers in the software business, who owned one pizzeria in Southern California. I was talking with him one day. I said, "Hey, we like to ski." He goes, "Oh, well, you ought to use my house. I've got a house up in the mountains, and next time you go, just use it." So I called him up and I said, "Hey, if your house is available, then I'd like to rent it." And he said, "Well, don't offend me by offering me money. I'm happy for you to stay there." And I said, "Well, but here's the challenge. We have 10 people. It's 2 families of 5, and there's 10 people." He goes, "Oh, no worries. There's plenty of room." I went, "Oh boy." Wow. So we went up to this place, and no kidding, everybody had a bed. And it was just this massive, beautiful house on the side of a mountain. And our friends that went with us, we were having breakfast one morning, just the 4 adults. And he says, "What does your friend do for a living again?" And I said, "He owns a pizza."
There's money in that?
Yeah, he owns a pizzeria. Wow. One. And he said, "Holy cow, we need to get in the pizza business." And one thing led to another. And the next thing you knew, we were opening up a pizzeria together. Now, our opening day, it took us, that was probably 2006 that we hatched the idea. Our opening day was August 3rd, 2008. And
great
yeah,
timing. Oh, yeah, incredible timing.
Brilliant market timing. I am a market timing genius, Dave, as I'll tell you. On my last company that I sold, I bought it in May of 2001, right? And so, of course, in September 2001, we all know what happened. The landscape dramatically changed. Well, the same thing here. We opened this very high-end pizza, but very good Italian food in a neighborhood that was kind of reaching for our quality of food 3 weeks before the market fell apart. And so brilliant market timing. So the first lesson that I'll tell you, that I'll give you a preview for, is that if you want to be successful in business, just watch me and don't open when I do, because there's some disaster coming.
Something's coming. Yes.
Yeah. So that's kind of the background of how we started this whole thing.
You're a portent. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yes. I'm an early indicator.
Wow. So you find yourself in the pizza business, having never been in a restaurant business or the pizza business in the past. And I'll get back to your normal barrage of questions. Yes. Tell me about your exit strategy that you had going in.
As I always tell everybody, this is the reason I wanted to talk about this example today, is because I probably broke every rule that I've always had for myself in business. And one of those is the exit strategy for this business was that we were going to be so wildly successful with this restaurant, one restaurant, or maybe open up a couple of them, that it was just throwing off cash, and that it would pay for our children's college education, that it would pay for we had dreams of it actually buying a house for us, like what my friend had in Salt Lake, John, still a great friend, by the way. So our exit strategy was that we didn't want to exit this business. We just wanted it to throw off the kind of cash that would give us some lifestyle stuff, right?
Just an heirloom you can pass to your kids. This is awesome.
Yeah. And so I rule, number 367 of, what I always tell business owners: don't even start a business without knowing your exit strategy. Well, in this case, my genuine thought was that I'm never going to exit this business. But as you already heard, since I told you we started in 2008 and we exited in late 2010 or early 2011, that it didn't go exactly the way as planned.
It's like 2.5 years or so. So why, I think I might know this, but why did you decide to sell?
So in 2010, my Granbury business, the Granbury Solutions software business, was really taking off. We took on some major investment in order to go out and do an industry roll-up. And it was taking more of my time at Granbury, but I loved being in the restaurant, right? But the restaurant was losing money. It was losing, a significant amount of money. And it was taking up a lot of time. So it was like a double whammy, right? We're losing money and I'm having to give my time to it. And I just decided I need to focus on the place where I can really drive long-term value, and get an exit. And so it's something that I probably thought about or learned later from Tony Robbins. If you're in a business where you aren't going to be able to make it, then get out of that business and go find a business that you can be.
Cut your losses early.
Yeah, cut your losses early. Well, I wish I'd cut them earlier than this. I looked at my wife one day and I said, look, I'm having to spend more time over at the software business because we really are about to launch this one into the stratosphere. And I don't want to put any more money into this restaurant. And so I think we need to get out of it. And she knew what that meant. That means we were going to walk away from our investment.
Yeah.
And over that roughly 2-year period, we'd invested about $500,000. And she looked at me and said, what do you mean? Are you crazy? Why do you want to exit this business? I mean, what are we going to do with our time? I know. I said, honey, trust me on this. It's time to get out. So that's what made me decide. We were also to the point where we were really not getting along with our partners in this business. We started this business as a partnership with our friends that we would vacate together with, and our friendship was deteriorating faster than the business was losing money, and it was because we really didn't give enough thought at the beginning of how are we going to run this? Who's going to be in charge? We were genuinely 50-50 partners. Karen and I owned 50%. The other partners owned 50%. But you have to understand, before we started this business, we spent our weekends together, right? I mean,
Sure.
It was one of those things with your relationship with people that, if you didn't have plans on Friday night, at 7:00, you just call the other one and, oh, we're coming over. Right. And that's, or why don't you guys come over here? I fired up the grill or whatever. And we
that
spent,
close. Yeah.
I mean, every week we were going on vacations together with our kids. I mean, we were very, very close. By 2010, we didn't even want to be in the same room together.
Man.
The decisions that were being made that were just, in my opinion, were just abysmal. But hey, I take responsibility for that, right? And
Sure.
and so,
I've heard it said, it's like, don't go into business with family, don't go into business with close friends, and there's always that opportunity to jeopardize that relationship. Yeah.
Fastest way to destroy a friendship is to go into business together. And look, but I do know people who are wildly successful as business partners. But again, I broke many of the rules going in. We had a partnership agreement, but it was almost a non-agreement because nobody had the upper hand. We had co-managing partners. Me and one of the spouses on the other side, and we had to agree, or we weren't going to. And so it was a formula for inertia. It was a formula.
Yeah, it's a delicate deal. Now, as you might recall, I had a 50-50 business partner in my business,
right.
But we decided early on we were friends. We weren't best buddies, right? We worked together is where we met. Totally different lifestyles, totally different skill sets, and kind of like-minded as far as business, but not. We were not polar opposites, but we were opposite enough that we stayed out of each other's way. He had responsibilities for certain things within the business. I had responsibilities for others. And the agreement we made early on was we're going to accept the other guy's, expertise and judgment. And we very rarely violated that, which was, I think, pretty unusual. A lot of people said you never make it work with 50-50 partners. And as you know, there's a lot of trepidation there. So.
Yeah. And but look, if you agree to those things up front, right, with this, we're not going to step on each other's toes. You're going to have full reign over this, and I'm going to have full reign over that. And you agree to those things up front. I mean, that's the kind of thing that a great partnership agreement will spell out. And a buy sell, we didn't even have a buy sell. Look, I mean, how many?
There's another check box.
Yeah, I know. We're counting up all the mistakes. Why? Because I never really thought that it was going to happen to me, and we were not capable then of ultimately working together, out of all four of the partners in the business, I was the only one that was a business guy. And I knew the formula for success. Why? Because I spent a lot of time with our customers talking about, okay, to make a great restaurant, or to make a restaurant really effective, it's got to be some formula like this. And this is what I was going for: 25% food cost, 25% labor, 25% overhead, and 25% to the owner. And that's now some of those move around a little bit. But you can't run, and that's specific to a pizza restaurant, right? I mean, so you can't run a Bob's Chop House, that way. Right. And so your labor is going to be a lot higher. Your food costs are probably going to be higher. But in a well-run pizzeria, rule of thumb, 25% food, 25% labor, 25% overhead, and then you should be making 25%. Well, our food cost was astronomical. It was in the high 30s, close to 40%.
Because you were a different breed of cat, right? You're going to be a very high end.
Yes. Yeah. And as soon as some of the conversations among the two managing partners, me and the other managing partner, were, we need to cut our food costs. I'm not willing to compromise on our food quality. Well, all right. Well, and we'd come to one impasse after the next. I said, well, then then we're going to have to raise our prices, except we're already at the top end of the market, right? And so, so it's those really hard business decisions that were really the drivers for me. That was like, you know what, we got to get out of this. So Karen and I made the decision. It was time to get out.
From the time you decided it's time to get out, how long was it before you actually did the transaction?
It was probably less than a week. I know that sounds shocking, but I mean, think about what we were doing here. And the only reason that it didn't happen in a day is because I had to let our partners overcome the shock of, hey, we're done. And because we didn't have a buy sell and we didn't have a way out, Karen and I basically said, we're walking away and we're giving you the business. So you've got the benefit of everything that we have purchased together, and it's all yours. And we had a letter agreement that Karen and I signed and handed over to them. And the only reason we didn't do it in one day was because it took them at least a week to overcome the shock of that. They were like, what are you talking about? How can, well, you guys own a piece of this, so you need to come in here and help save it. I said, well, we've decided that we're done. So we are gifting our shares to you. And we know what that means. We're walking away from $500,000 that we've invested in this business. Yep. Wow. So we must have had pretty strong feelings to do that quickly.
Yeah. Wow. So some of the other typical questions that I've heard Tom ask probably don't apply in this case. So like a transition team. Yeah. Transition was the door closed behind you, it sounds like.
Yeah, that was it. That we basically just walked away, and now I did have an attorney just review there was a term for it. It was our partnership resignation or whatever it was. But
just to make sure it was couched the right way or the right words.
Well, I wanted to make certain that I didn't have any liabilities coming back at me. Right. And so
recourse.
Yeah, I didn't want them to come back and say, oh, well, this happened, so you're going to have to, you're going to owe us for this. No, So our agreement was signed by us and them that agreed that we were walking away and that they were taking control and that they would absorb any future liabilities. I didn't want anybody coming back on me for their future transgressions. If somebody came back on us for past transgressions, fine, but for any future transgressions, I wasn't willing to take any liability. So really, our transition team was an attorney who was actually my corporate attorney at the time over at Granbury, which we had made the change from one of my favorite attorneys who's been on this show, David Hammer, to a gentleman who's since passed away, Kirk Isaacson, who is basically, David Hammer, who was living in Chicago, just very much a transaction attorney. And he said, yeah, this all looks good. So that was our transition team was him.
Wow.
And there was no due diligence.
Yeah. As you exited then, was your feeling, and this is an interesting, I guess I've never been through anything like that, obviously, but did you feel like with you essentially gifting them everything that you had put in, did that make their chances of making the business viable better? Or did you ever look at it that way, I guess?
Wow, that is a great question. And there's probably two ways to think about that. Number one, from purely a decision standpoint and going forward and speed to execute, yes, us leaving meant that there was no longer these two parties butting heads. It was their decision, and it was their decision to take it and run with it or destroy it. I will be honest with you, though, the thing that was going through my mind was that it won't last. because they're not thinking about this as a business. They're thinking about this as their show place, right? This is our baby, you know, this is, oh no, yeah, this is our little project. And they weren't thinking. So I knew in the back of my mind that the business would not survive, and it didn't. But us leaving gave them the ability to make all the decisions and take it whatever direction that they wanted. Now, I probably wouldn't have wanted it after what all we went through, but genuinely, and of course, this is all conjecture because the world will never know. If the tables had been turned and they made the decision to walk away, there is no way I would have let it fail. Right. That's just not in my.
Dumped another 500,000 into make sure.
I probably would have put another 500 into it, but I would have fixed the things to get it moving in the right direction. Right. Yeah. And look, the other side of the equation is something that had nothing to do with our partnership. The economy tanked right after we opened. And so, you know, the thing that I love about pizza businesses are, and one of the reasons why I served that industry for a long time as a provider, a technology provider, is that it's almost recession proof. That in good times or bad times, people eat pizza, right?
Remember the pizza index? Like if there's something happening at the White House, they order in a whole bunch of pizzas.
Right. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah.
I mean, so it's kind of like, we're in dire straits. Get pizza.
Yeah. I remember, what was it? Famously, years ago when Christie was the governor of New Jersey, and he stood up in front of the House because they were having their budget crisis and whatnot. And he goes, I know you guys are hoping that I'm here to save the day, but here's what I'm here to tell you. In just a second, when I'm done talking to you, I'm going to go out and get in that big black limo that the state of New Jersey pays for. I'm going to ride back to the governor's mansion, and I'm going to order a couple of pizzas. You guys call me when you got something I can sign. So, I mean, it was like classic, Christie. But pizza is a category that. It's funny we were playing in a space that was kind of a reach up, right? I mean, it was a high quality, high end pizza. You know, you don't get a $10 pizza at our place. You don't get a $10 pizza at our place, right? And so in good times, people will reach up to that, and in bad times, the people who would eat Bob's are reaching down to that, right? And so it just kind of moves, and it's almost recession proof. In fact, it was one of the businesses that really thrived during COVID because it was one of the few businesses that was tooled for carry out and delivery. Right. Yep. But the other unfortunate thing is, so soon as the economy tanked, so believe me, all the business problems were not because the partners weren't getting along. We were also a victim of the economy. And right after the economy tanked, what happened to us? Directly across the street from our pizzeria, which we were kind of an island out in the middle of thousands of houses, directly across the street, a Little Caesars opened, and $5 pizzas. And so we're, you know, our
$5 pizza, $5 pizza. Yeah,
that's it. And we were in a neighborhood that had to reach up for us. And it was just a formula for disaster. So,
oh man, jeez.
So well, again, I want to be sure that everybody knew that there were a lot of circumstances here. It wasn't just a failed partnership. It was, there were other things in play.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, great. Well, we're going to take a short break, but we're talking with Tom Bronson, a member of the 17% Club. Although I'm wondering if we ought to knock him back a percentage or two here because of this story, but let's take a quick break and we'll be back.
Every business will eventually transition, some internally to employees and managers, and some externally to third-party buyers. Mastery Partners equips business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their businesses on their terms using our 4-step process. We start with a snapshot of where your business is today. Then we help you understand where you want to be and design a custom strategy to get you there. Next, we help you execute that strategy with the assistance of our amazing resource network. And ultimately, you'll be able to transition your business on your terms. What are you waiting for? More time? More revenue? If you want to maximize your business value, it takes time. Now is that time. Get started today by checking us out at www.masterypartners.com or email us at info@masterypartners.com to learn more.
We're back with Tom Bronson, and we're talking about one of his many business exits. So, Tom, you've already let loose a lot of things that happened here, but what is the main thing that you learned going through this process?
Wow, yeah, there's really a couple things that I learned. Number one, don't shortcut the process, right? You know, I felt like I've done this so many times. With 100 transactions in my rearview mirror, I knew better, right? I should have been more intentional about the setup from the beginning. We should have been more intentional about roles and responsibilities, but we were such good friends that we felt like it would fall into place. And that is a formula for disaster. So that's number one, be intentional about how it's set up from the beginning. And by the way, it's not too late. If you're in a 50-50 partnership today and you're still getting along, take time to write down, right? And to get out of one another. What are the roles and responsibilities so that, and why do you write agreements like that? You don't write agreements to govern what you're doing. You write agreements because what happens in the event of a failure, right? And so,
correct. Well, and it's even, I think, more important to do it when everybody's happy and getting along, whether it's before you start the process or if you're in the middle and things are going well. That's a great time to I think, define all those things. So in the event that circumstances change and like the economy changes or another external factor happens, health, whatever, that you've got all that stuff in place.
Yep.
Ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness that that it wasn't that something happened to me, or right, because if something had happened to one or the other of us, then that would have been, we were completely unprepared for that. So be more intentional about the setup. I'm just not a big fan of 50-50 partnership. Somebody has to be in charge. Somebody has to call the shots. And when you disagree, somebody has to break the disagreement. So I say, even if you're in a 50-50, who gets to call the shots? Who has last say there? And I guess the third thing is that, as I alluded to in the first half of this podcast, the fastest way to ruin a very close long-term friendship and relationship is to go into business together.
Yeah.
I never thought that was going to happen to me.
No, well, and I think everybody's that way. It sounds like the perfect deal. I mean, I had an instance many years ago. I hired one of my best friends.
Yep.
Because it was a circumstance. He really needed to make a change. We needed his skill set. I didn't even discuss it with my business partner. I just said, we're just going to hire this guy because I've known him for forever. I mean, it won't be a problem. It turned out to be a big problem.
Yeah.
And it very nearly cost me a friendship. It didn't. We worked through it, but it was very close.
Well, I'm glad, because so many of them do end in disaster that way, the way ours did.
And you can never recover. Yeah, definitely. So you've offered some advice already, but what advice would you give business owners that are looking to transition? I mean, and specifically, I think just on any circumstances, not just this kind of exit, but somebody we're looking to transition.
No, I get it. I hear the question. It's don't let the transition drive you, because here's the thing: if you don't define what your exit looks like, take the time to think about what does your ideal exit look like, even when you're starting your business, and because otherwise, if you don't have an exit strategy that you're driving, an exit strategy is going to show up and drive you. And that is a terrible thing. So how does that happen? In our case, it was the failed partnership and the economy, right? And so if we'd have had an intentional plan, we could have worked through that plan. In some cases, it's the death of an owner, right? Recently, I was called to help a business owner that it was after her father passed away, and then her sister was running the business, and in very rapid succession, the sister passed away. And then the sister, who didn't have anything to do with the business, suddenly owned the business. Well, so what happens here? The exit strategy then is going to drive the process. She's just got to get out of it. And so be more intentional about setting things up, plan for those things in advance, and really think about the exit strategy, because as I say frequently, and I know our listeners have heard this a lot, exit strategy is business strategy. It doesn't mean I'm going to exit and then it drives everything, but exit strategy informs business strategy. It helps you make better decisions about your business if you understand where you're going and what the exit looks like. And so that's my top advice, I think, to business owners about being intentional, because otherwise an exit strategy is going to show up on your doorstep, and it's going to be the driver, whether that's illness, death, a buyer that comes out of nowhere. And it's better to think and plan in advance than to be reactive to an exit strategy.
And it's interesting. I know that this whole podcast series is geared around business owners and the decisions they make within a business that they own and control. Some of these same principles go to employees as well. I've got a great friend he is a sales guru. I mean, he is just one of the best pure sales guys I've ever seen in my life. And
I know who that is.
Well, no, you probably don't, but he's had a succession of working for technology companies, coming in as the chief sales officer, and just rapidly bringing that company, way up, increase their game incredibly. And he's a magnet for really good performing people. When he moves somewhere, people move with him. He's a great judge of character, knows how to surround himself with the right people. And we tried to convince him a few years ago to take the CEO position of a company that we were associated with. And he had worked for it in the past, and the opening had come up, and he looked at it hard, and he says, no, I'm the sales guy. This is what I do. And he is a master at negotiating his way out on the way in. So when he takes a position, he crafts his comp plan. He crafts everything around that when he leaves, he's going to leave on his terms and always to the benefit. Whether the company goes public, whether the company is purchased by another private company, whether company starts to fail, whatever happens, when he leaves, he's always on top, and it's very, very interesting. And he has no compulsion to be an entrepreneur and own his own business, but he has run his own business within other businesses for years and just does a fantastic job. And I think that planning your way out on the way in is the key to that. I mean, and that just so applies.
That's great advice. I love that. I hadn't really thought about how that applies to employees as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, whether it's, how you negotiate a stock plan or anything like that, he's just phenomenal at that. So you had the advantage, I think, in this transaction that this wasn't your entire life savings on the line. You were able to walk away. Now it hurt, I'm sure, a lot, but you were able to walk away and continue. And you were obviously we're focused on Granbury at that point in time. And, good things happened following that. But it'd be I can just imagine if it was your life savings on the line and you've done this and gone into business with a great friend, and now we've got a massive failure on our hands, that would be devastating.
It would be, yes, you're right. We were very fortunate because I'd been through other exits before. This wasn't my life savings, but I'll be honest with you, it was pretty devastating, right? I mean, it was devastating to my ego. It was devastating to our bank account, right? We weren't wondering where our next meal was coming from, right? But I mean, $500,000 is a lot of money, and I don't care how wealthy you are, but that's and by the way, people who have money hate to lose money.
Yeah.
So
I won't say $500,000 means as much to Elon Musk as it did to you, but it means a lot to him. So.
Yeah, I mean, really, yeah. And so, I mean, it was still wildly painful, even though we weren't worried about where our next meal was coming from.
Mm-hmm. Well, cool. Well, I've got a couple more questions for you. So the last one, I guess, that's specific to this. I mean, this podcast is really all about maximizing business value. What's the one most important thing that you would recommend to business owners that's going to build value in their business?
I think it's finishing out the maximize business value theme. I have to grab a copy of my book and hold it up. It's begin with the exit in mind, right? To me, I think that is the most important business strategy. And by the way, that doesn't mean just, I'm going to sell this for $20 million. Okay, well, how are you going to do it? How are you going to get there? What's your culture going to be like? What is your, what are your revenue drivers? I love one of our past guests on the podcast talks about VCR, value creation revenue. So revenue is not all created equally, right? But to me, the one most important thing is to sit down and define what the exit looks like, because then you can work your way backwards to where you are today and determine how you get there. And that's what we do with our clients. So to me, the number one piece of advice is define the end, begin with the exit in mind.
Yeah. And when you always have time to do course corrections, so you can say, I'm going to exit this business when it hits $20 million or a certain profit level, or I turn 55, whatever the number is. You may get there and say, things are going great. I'm going to continue. But the thing is, you've got to that point where you can exit if you want. And I think that's important.
That's it. And always be ready, right? Always be ready. And if you run your business with the exit strategy already defined, then you are more likely to be ready. And that way, when an opportunity appears out of the blue, you'll be ready for it. When if something happens to you as the business owner, the business will be ready for it. I love that.
Yeah, that's perfect. So now we get to our bonus question. And I know you always hit me up with a bonus question. So this is for extra credit, Tom. So this may help you.
I can't wait.
So now you've been in obviously 100 businesses. You've exited, you've bought and sold 100 businesses. You've gone through this many, many times. Over the course of those years, I'm sure you have hired and fired suppliers, service providers, employees, and even professional service people like banks and CPAs and lawyers and stuff. How do you know when it's time to fire?
Time to fire?
Yeah, or time to fire somebody. Time to terminate a relationship.
God,
you just described one pretty strong. So
you scared me. I thought you were going to tell me or ask me to tell you about my favorite firing. So because I have one of those. How
do you know when it's time to terminate?
So that is a great question, Dave, and I can answer that very simply. It is the first time I think about it. The first time I think that perhaps it's time to sever a relationship is the best time, because here's the thing that happens. We talk ourselves out of it. And I've done this myself hundreds of times. where, well, perhaps I didn't do enough to train this person, or perhaps I didn't give them enough opportunity to succeed, or perhaps they just need more time, or whatever. Anytime that I've ever thought I need to fire that person and I didn't take action, I never changed my mind. And ultimately I did fire that person, but not without a lot more pain of 6 months, a year of continuing to put up with whatever it is that was the reason that I wanted to fire him in the first place. So that is a super, super simple question for me to answer, and that it easier to answer than it is to execute, but it's the very first time you think of it, that's the time to go. And by the way, I think of that even with our clients, right? Even with our customers. The first time I think it's time to fire a customer or to fire a supplier, that's the time to do it. The first time I think of it.
Yeah. I can't remember, in the sales world, there's a thing called the PIP, the Performance Improvement Plan.
Oh, yeah.
So when you have a salesman that's not quite working out, not quite achieving their goals, you say, okay, let's re-examine. Okay. We're going to put you on a performance improvement plan, and you lay out some ground rules, and you've got to achieve these milestones in the next week, month, whatever. I've never seen anybody that went on a PIP that succeeded. Eventually, they left the company, and they were terminated. At some point, right. And all the PIP does is delay the inevitable, and it really. In my experience, it's always been it's very bad for that person because they're in the wrong spot. They really need to be in a different place. Bad for the company, bad for the sales leader. It's also bad for the rest of the team. They're watching this person struggle and take up a lot of management's time and so on and resources, and they're not going to get them. And it's just been and I think if I look at mine over the years, I've always been the wrong way. I've been too quick to hire and too slow to fire. And it really should be the opposite.
It really should be. In fact, anybody that's too quick to hire should go back and listen to our podcast with Jim Roddy, Hire Like You Just Beat Cancer, and read his book because he defines a really great process. But, and part of those PIPs, those are driven by the HR industry because we want to prevent ourselves from getting into a legal, situation. So you got to give them an opportunity to perform. But you're right. I don't know that I've ever actually retained somebody after they went on to a performance plan. And so probably the best thing an employee could do is if they're put onto a performance improvement plan, a PIP, just leave.
Yeah.
Right? Because
that's
for whatever reason,
get that resume freshened up,
Yeah, get that resume tightened up because you're going to be looking for a job here soon. That's exactly right. It's a hard thing to do because the psychologically what we do as business owners is if somebody fails, we take it as our own failure, right? We either hired wrong or we didn't give them the right resources or we didn't train them properly. At some point though, people are just they're not going to succeed, and you need to give them the ability to fail and move on. Right. And
sometimes they're just in the wrong place. I mean, I had a guy that wanted to be a sales guy. I hired him as a sales guy. He actually tried to do all the things you're supposed to do. He just didn't succeed. And he was incredibly technical. He rewrote our order entry process, and I said, you're a technical guy. You really need to be in the technical world. He says, no, I'm determined to be a sales guy because my dad told me I couldn't be a sales guy. I'm going to prove him wrong. And that was his motivation. And he left us, went to work for Sprint, become one of their senior technical leaders, has flourished in his career. Not a sales guy, but he's flourished and done very, very well. So a lot of times they're just in the wrong spot, So.
Look, I do try to keep tabs on folks if I care about them personally, even though they're the wrong person. I've seen people who I've fired in the past who've risen all the way to the CEO roles in other companies, and I find that to be just very gratifying because perhaps they learned something and moved on to the right place, right? So, yeah, it's for usually when you fire somebody, I know it's hard. It's like 24 hours of agony, but rip that Band-Aid off and move on. And it's going to be better for them as well.
Well, we'll put that in the, being booted out the door by Tom Bronson is a recipe for success.
There you go.
I mean, what else? So
I have fired some of America's best CEOs.
That's right. I am a great judge of character. Well, thanks, Tom, for being our guest today. And I have to ask you this, but I suspect people will know this, but how can our viewers and listeners get in touch with you?
You know what? All they have to do is click on the link or make a comment right here on wherever they found this podcast, and I will respond. And of course, at our website, masterypartners.com, you can click a button right there and get right onto my calendar. That's an easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Well, great. Well, this is the Maximize Business Value podcast, and we give practical advice to business owners on how to increase the value and build long-term sustainable value in your business. Make sure you tune in each week. This thing is on a regular basis, where this will be number 111, 110, 111?
110. Yeah, 110.
110. It's amazing. And you can follow this wherever you find podcasts. So we're on all the platforms. Till the next time, which you won't see me sitting here, you'll see Tom, but I'm Dave Casey reminding you, it's never too early to start planning your own exit while you maximize your business value.
Thank you for tuning into the Maximize Business Value podcast with Tom Bronson. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition on their terms. Learn more on how to build long-term sustainable business value and get free value-building tools by visiting our website, www.masterypartners.com. That's master with a Y, masterypartners.com. Check it out.
That was perfect. I wouldn't make any changes on that.